What has been your worst experience flying in a plane? 20,000 featuring the O2 masks come down. Looming silence from the crew. Finally, the pilot comes on and says lots of electrical systems are out and we're landing at a small airport in 9 minutes. The descent was on full air brakes, which made the flight loud and shaking, with kids screaming because their ears were hurting. Parents screaming at their kids to blow while holding their noses. Oh no. We got a voucher for lunch at the airport while we waited for a new plane. Oh in airport food. That's like half a bottle of water and 3 almonds. Oh no. About 6 years ago I was sitting on the plane and I suddenly felt a tickle in my throat. It just wouldn't go away. I'd cough and cough and cough. Nothing. The only thing that helped was ice chips. But even then I couldn't stop, it was miserable. That night I woke up in the middle of the night with 2 swollen eyes, swollen lips, hives all over my body, hot joints, and a tight chest. I was having some severe allergic reaction to something, which means that on the plane, my throat was closing and I just didn't know it. Of course the ice chips helped because they were keeping the swelling down. What's weird is that has never happened before or since then, and I'm not allergic to anything that I know of. This is why I keep a couple of Benadryls in my carry-on bag. You can literally save someone's life with them. Something similar happened to me. I ate a burger from Hungry Jack's, Aussie Burger King, and I got a severe reaction. It started with severe itching, followed by hives, swollen face, and my throat was beginning to close up. I had to go to the hospital because it was the weekend and all the doctors were closed. The worst of it was my feet got so swollen that it really hurt to walk. It sucked. The strange thing is that I had Hungry Jack's lots of times before and lots of times afterwards, and I never that reaction again. Turbulence so bad, just before landing in LGA, that the flight attendants screamed in horror. They do this for a living. So naturally, I shat my pants. Flying advice from my dad has always been you'll know you're screwed if the cabin crew looks scared. Was in a short flight and heard a flight attendant scream bloody murder. Turns out a rat got into the plane and was hiding in compartment and jumped out when that flight attendant opened it. Another flight attendant caught the damn thing and kept it in a makeshift cage. This was when I was 10-11 years old. Went on a 9-hour flight and had the middle seat. An older woman sat in the window seat and had a horrendous smelling perfume on. The kind that gives you a headache in the first 10 minutes. She went to the restroom and reapplied her perfume every couple of hours. The smell plus turbulence was enough for me to throw up for the duration of the flight. For years after I was so scarred that I took motion sickness pills every flight, only to realize I didn't have motion sickness. It was just that old woman's horrible perfume. That was one of the worst parts of being forced to go to church as a kid. All the old ladies bathed in so much perfume it made you want to puke. This happened to me as an adult, and it triggered a 4-day migraine. The woman sprayed the perfume directly on herself in the cabin initially until I begged her to stop. Then she switched to an obsessive bathroom drenching every hour for the rest of the flight. It was torture. I was on a small commuter plane, think about 20 seats, single file the length of the cabin, and we hit a wind rotor. I think that's what it's called. Off the mountains. It felt like a giant baby grabbed the plane and shook it like a rattle. Hands down the worst turbulence I've ever felt. Other than that, my trips have been rather uneventful. Sometimes I'll laugh inappropriately when I get scared. We had turbulence once where the plane felt like it was sliding side to side. People were puking and I was sitting there giggling like a jerk. Same kind of small plane. Florida to Louisiana. Turbulence was shaking us up and down in our seats practically the whole flight. After battling so much wind, it had used up most of the fuel. We weren't going to make our destination. They had to open up a closed airport for an emergency landing to refuel. I've never been on a quieter flight where it was clear upon glancing around that we were all praying very loudly inside our heads. The fear was palpable. I wasn't sure if I should be glad my fiancé was with me so I could squeeze his hand in terror. Poor guy. Or be sad that he was going to die with me. After the refueling and emergency restroom visit for everyone, airport tried to refuse us off the plane. We landed safely at our destination and thanked the crew profusely. Not my story but one from my father. He was flying in Russia and there was a terrible storm during the flight and obviously it caused extreme turbulence. Just to note, the name Besmurtny translates in Russian to undying. Also, a lightning strike hit the wing, which was pretty scary. Could have stopped it. He was flying in Russia. I flew on an Italian airline one time, and whenever there was turbulence, the pilot would come on and say something lengthy and presumably reassuring in Italian, and then something cryptic in French, and then follow it up with an extremely truncated statement in English. There'd be a whole paragraph in Italian, several sentences in French, and then it'd be plane shake for a while. Fasten belt now. Right, double quotation mark. 12+ hour flight. Middle aisle on a 747. The seat recliner was broken. The guy next to me took his shoes off and his feet stank. The woman to my left spilled orange juice on me. And the headphone plug for the in-flight entertainment was broken. I did get extra potato chips as a compensation for the seat problem, though. Winking face. You should have complained about the broken plug. One time my entire screen was broken and they moved me to first class for a transatlantic flight. It was incredible except for the fact that they forgot to feed me, but I'll take it. Extra potato chips. Must have been a US airline for sure. Delta or American? Child screaming her lungs out in the seat behind us for the last 40 minutes of a 10-hour flight because she didn't want to put her seatbelt on for the descent, and her useless father telling her stop screaming 100 times, then arguing with the flight attendants by saying look at her. She doesn't want to put the seatbelt on. There's nothing I can do. The saving grace was one very sassy male flight attendant who would walk by every 2 minutes and just say be the parent to the father and then continue walking. It was hilarious. Bless that attendant. I was holding my 1.5-year-old on a flight and the air pressure change from landing had her wailing. I tried everything I could think of to calm her. People were unbuckling their seatbelts and coming over to try and help. Finally, I filled a water bottle cap with water and had her drink from it. She wasn't used to drinking like that, but I was thinking that the swallowing motion would help pop her ears. It worked as she drank it, then stopped crying and fell immediately to sleep exhausted. On a flight from Philadelphia to Denver, late December 1990, as we get about an hour from Denver, pilot tells us a blizzard has closed the Denver airport, and we need to divert. We divert to a place called Gunnison Company. Gunnison Airport is small, not really set up for large commercial airliners. As we approach, I look out the window and see mountaintops on either side. The captain comes on and tells us to prepare for an emergency landing, meaning stow your stuff, buckle your seatbelt, and assume the crash position, as in put your head between your legs. Now I'm about 14 years old, traveling with my aunt, 2 cousins and their 2 friends. My cousin Billy and I are joking about this situation, while my aunt is praying with my other cousin. We land, and need basically every foot of the runway to come to a stop. The pilot then has to get off the plane and make a phone call because we are basically alone. Hours from Denver, they get some shuttle buses to show up after about an hour. Then we begin the 6-hour ride to Denver. That was a long ass day. This may be an ignorant southerner question, but if you can't fly in a blizzard, wouldn't it also be unsafe to drive? Getting food poisoning 6 minutes before landing and experiencing the landing on the toilet. You had a fish, didn't you? You should have chosen chicken. Are you me? I was actually feeling it the whole flight, but it didn't hit until we were landing. First round in the bath bag, but no way the second round was going in there. Got up and ran the second we hit the runway. Flight attendant tried to stop me, but they already knew I wasn't feeling well. I had asked them if they had anything for nausea earlier during the flight, so I just gave them a look and shook my head and they knew. I made it to the bathroom in time, but did not get the toilet seat up quick enough, so the next wave just went everywhere. Spent the rest of the 20-minute taxi to the gate spewing. I felt bad for whoever had to clean up that bathroom. I had a lot of ear problems as a kid that required multiple surgeries. I figured out on my first flight at age 19 that my ears could still bother me when the worst ear pain of my life hit me during the descent. Since then I figured out how to make them pop, making it less of an issue. But I was unprepared that first time and spent quite a bit of time holding back tears until my ears popped on their own a few minutes after landing. How do you make them pop? I have severe ear pain when descending and for about a week afterwards. I found relief in chewing gum, slowly drinking water during descent, and Sinutab an hour or so before landing. We were flying from Florida to London when one of the engines caught fire somewhere out over the Atlantic. So had to turn back and land at New York. The engine on the replacement plane also caught fire. So the pilot had to turn back and land at New York. We didn't chance it with a third plane and went with a different carrier. I was 8 years old at the time, and for some strange reason, I'd never had a nightmare before then. My first nightmare was on the third plane back, and involved a Mickey Mouse in a glass coffin and an emaciated green version of Thing from the Addams Family. I've thankfully never been on a plane that had an issue, but I like to think that if I was, I wouldn't have a problem with going back up in the air afterwards. Because what's the chance it happens again? Thanks for ruining that for me. My first nightmare flightmare. I unknowingly had a sinus infection when flying from Greece to Italy. Thought I just felt terrible from a hangover. About 20 minutes into the flight my eardrum starts bursting and leaking fluid. It was some of the worst pain I've ever felt. The pressure subsided a bit once we landed in Rome, but I had almost 100% hearing loss in that ear until the swelling went down 4 days later. I chug Sudafed like crazy now if I feel any sort of congestion prior to flying. I hope you sought medical attention. My grandmother ended up with chronic vertigo because of a burst eardrum from an ear infection. It damaged the bones in her inner ear. She also had hearing loss from it. Ouch. I've had ear pain leading up to a burst eardrum before, and can't imagine how much worse it would be in an airplane. We ran into one of our neighbors on a flight going home. He was put next to her old lady who used him as a pillow, then ordered a Coke and spilled it on him, then got coffee and spilled it again, and then another coffee and spilled it on him again. He flipped out and was moved into our seat row. Did she think the drinks were on him? I was seated next to a woman with an emotional support animal. If I had to guess, it was a pug chihuahua mix. Whatever it was small enough for her to keep on her lap. Apparently, the dog needed its own emotionally support animal because it was a wreck. It kept standing up, whining, and the mofo shite on her lap and would leak piss anytime someone walked by. The smell, nauseated face. Damn, who TF would put up with a dog crapping and peeing all over them? That's nasty. Some of the airlines have banned emotional support animals now. It had reached the apex of ridiculousness, so you can't blame them. And Vanity must have her extremely understanding Shetland pony. Flying home to Australia, there's some European family whose daytime is apparently our nighttime. Bored kids run endless up and down the aisles making sleep impossible. Cabin staff were useless. While in transit, a kid produces a green laser and waves it around. Unsure if it was powerful enough to blind. But idiot parents don't tell him off. I just walked away. Had enough bullshit. Thankfully their connecting flight was not the same. Slept for maybe 2 hours before arriving to attend my mother's funeral. I'm sorry for your loss. And that was just icing on the cake. Bored kids run endless up and down the aisles making sleep impossible. That's when you accidentally leave your foot in the aisle. Flying Amsterdam Dusseldorf when KLM used to fly the small Fokker 50s during a very windy late November afternoon. The landing was hands down the worst I've ever experienced. Are you a prop plane, Fokker? Flying into SFO once and we hit wake turbulence. Normal turbulence just feels like small little potholes in the air. But wake turbulence is side-to-side turbulence caused by disturbed air from a plane in front. I truly thought the plane was going to flip over and crash as we were landing. I've flown a lot, so not much scares me when flying. But I still vividly remember that. Experience this in SFO as well. The flight attendant said something over the PA like please clap for the pilot's perfect landing. After we landed. 6-hour flight to the west coast. Plane was very hot inside. Had 2 small kids behind me screaming and kicking the whole time. The row was 3 seats wide. My row was 3 sweaty fat people, myself included. I had the window seat. Behind us was the mother on the aisle seat with a toddler in her lap. The toddler would screech every couple minutes and would run up and down the aisle. The 2 older kids behind me spent most of the flight climbing on my seat and playing in the floor hitting my seat. Their names were super basic names like Jaden and Braden. I learned through the non-stop arguing and screeching fights. The mom did nothing the entire flight, even with requests by the staff. I don't get it. I have kids and I just give them a dose of children's Dramamine, knocks them out cold. I just don't understand parents that won't even consider these types of things. I don't advise anybody to follow my lead. I'm an idiot. But this idiot's kids are sleeping away or so groggy they don't want to cause a scene whenever we travel. And we have to travel a lot since we live so far from home. 10-12 plus hour transits aren't far-fetched for us. My wife and I like to travel. We live far from our families and we like going to far-off places from time to time. 10 plus hours on a shady Latin American bus into the mountains? Sure. Why not? My first flight ever. Immediately after landing, a woman who was clearly intoxicated screaming about how she needed to get her dog off the storage under the plan. She started pushing people out of the way and engaged in a physical altercation with another flyer. Needless to say, she was arrested. As if the 3-hour flight wasn't enough time on the plane. We had to wait for all this to go down prior to exiting. Oh god. When did flying become such a trash magnet? Flying solo. Got seated next to someone with horrendous BO. Longest 4 hours of my life. Worst. I've had this experience and it's nauseating. It just doesn't go away. You can't become used to it to any degree. Which is awful. Waves of stench you can't escape.